the first part, the interesting part is that if you look at the past US presidential election since 1977, actually no president is being elected if when it comes close to the election day, actually after about 1,000 days in office, which you can see from here, and the approval rate is below 50, technically it won't get re-elected. But Donald Trump being Donald Trump, so we have no idea, whether he can create history or not. But I will share with you some of the recent developments or some statistic on where it points the US election to. Now, the first thing is that this round, I think one important part is that you all have to understand that this 2020 election is for the first time that millennials and the younger generations, actually the eligible voters actually is more than the baby boomers, which is 55 years and above. And if you can see that based on the survey, essentially the younger the generation, actually they are more inclined to support Democrats. So the whole question will be, will these baby boomers or will these millennials come out to vote? Because in the past, you can see that the voting rate or the turnout rate for the millennials is relatively low. It is always the baby boomers and the silent majority are the one that is more so-called active in going out for voting. So this round, it all boils back to whether the younger generation becomes more willing to go out to vote. And that probably will turn the results the other way around, because you know that silent majority and baby boomers is more inclined towards Republican, or rather to say Donald Trump. Now, if you look into that, the survey also tell you, I mean, it just gel back to what the previous survey is, that the interesting part is that we know that we are talking about this election. Of course, it's not just a presidential election, but it is also the midterm election for the Senate and also for the House. Now, if you look at it, interestingly, is that the scenario of maybe, I mean, which Malaysians sometimes like to, where the husband vote for one party and the wife vote for another party, ultimately the end result is zero sum, it becomes 0-0, right? Of course, in US presidential election, there have been that possible scenario is like Trump win the election, but Republican lose the Senate, or Biden win the election, but the Republicans still control the Senate. But this round, based on the survey, the recent survey, is that most of these voters, if they're either a Republican or Democrat supporter, then they call it straight ticket voting, which means that if they vote for Biden, they will also vote for Democrats, senators, or even the lower house. Similarly for Trump. At this moment, the interesting part, again, it gels back to the previous survey that the younger generation are all inclined towards the so-called Democrats, except you can see one thing is silent majority, right? The silent majority is still more inclined towards the Republican and Donald Trump. And the interesting part that now the very, very, very close fight, like in Florida and in a few states like Michigan and all these, especially in Florida, where Hispanic is actually accounts to a significant voters. but the situation can be slightly different. Although here the survey say that Hispanic is more inclined towards the Democrats, but in Florida the situation actually is still a very uncertain, because some Hispanic, especially those either they seek refugee from Cuba or the second generation, they are still very allergic towards the word so-called communism or the left wing, where this Democrat, especially you look at the Trump election campaign, he framed Biden as the leftist. That is where some Hispanic are actually quite worried. That's why Florida state is still very close to actually call who will win the race, right? Now, so the latest, I think most of you also are aware that based on the real clear politics, Biden seems to get in the lead, right? But there are so many states that actually it is the so-called toss-up states, right? Where you still don't know who actually will win the states, right? Because you know that in US election is winners take all. So the moment that your party win it, then technically you can consider that the electoral college is all under you. So the latest survey is that within these few very close fight states, right, the swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Florida, and some situation has changed a little bit, because 2 days ago, right, the Supreme Court, right, ruled that in Michigan, ballots, even if it is valid, although it's postmarked by 2nd of November, before that, they say that if it's postmarked by 2nd of November and if it arrives even until 17th of November, it can still be counted. But the reason Supreme Court verdict is that that is a no, right? All the votes are considered void if it's received after 3rd of November. So how this would change the Biden lead in this Michigan is something that yet to be seen. And similarly for Wisconsin, originally it's supposed to be until 9th of November, but now the judge ruled that it can only be counted after up to 3rd of November, right? The received by the election committee. Now for Pennsylvania, although the court ruled that until 6th of November is acceptable, but it also leaves some so-called rooms for dispute, because it said that although they accept that the state has the authority to decide or to accept the postal vote that is postmarked by 3rd and then arrive on the 6th up to 6th of November, but it also leaves a statement to say that this may be against the Constitution. So if Pennsylvania state becomes the ultimate state, the last state that decide who is the winners, then you can be rest assured that there will be a lot of legal dispute and all this that create even more uncertainties to the market as well. Now, so the interesting part now is that because of the change, right, in the court rulings in Michigan and Wisconsin, and you can see that very clearly, those who are leaning towards Biden, right, prefer to go by postal votes, whereas those who are leaning towards, or rather to say Trump supporters, right, 80% of them actually will want to be vote in person, because they are the type of people to a certain extent, like the party mood. I think if you can see when Donald Trump go for his campaign, right, you have hundreds of thousands of people gather together. It's like a carnival. So this, how it would change the outcome on the polling day, is something very interesting to note, especially now some states are start to have some lockdown and all this. So how it will affect is really until the last minute, it's very difficult to call. Now, Another interesting statistic is that actually, as of 25th of October, actually there are already 60 million people voted, which is actually larger than the total number of people voted in 2016, right? And this 60 million is either they voted through mail or in the early voting. And if you look at the swing state, right, Wisconsin is about 36% already voted. Presumably, rather to say, based on some statistic, actually the ratio is almost 2:1. That means 2 for Biden and only 1. Every 2 votes to Biden, Donald Trump only get 1 vote, in terms of the roughly the estimate. I mean, you know that the actual result is not announced yet, but based on some survey, Michigan is about a quarter voted. Florida is already about 37% voted. So this also, first, voted, does it mean that ultimately all these postal vote will come in? And even if come in, how many are actually so-called valid votes and how many are so-called void votes that or spoiled vote in Malaysia context? We still have no idea. We still have no idea. The major reason is that the voting is very complicated in US, which I will share with you a little bit later. And don't forget, I mean, we also have the senators voting, so that also will decide whether Republican will still maintain the majority or Democrat will take over. Because you know that if Biden win and Democrat also win the so-called Senate, then the situation on the policy and all this can be very different. Now, when I say the vote counting is going to be very complicated, because the ballot in US is super complicated. You can see here, actually this is already a summarize. The actual ballot actually, I mean, for Colorado, actually is about 30 pages, right? Because the voting is not only limited on the presidential candidate, and even for presidential candidate, actually there are 1,224 candidates stand for election. It's not only just Joe Biden and Donald Trump, so the list can go on. Of course, I mean, very unlikely there will be a mistake on ticking whether who they are voting for. But again, because of this 1,224, if it becomes a very close election, then some of these votes actually can decide who is the winner or who is the loser, right? On a very marginal difference. And like I say, the ballot is super complicated. I mean, in a sense, because besides you vote for the president, you also, I mean, we know that you vote for Senate, and on top of that, you vote for the state office, then you vote for the judges, right? I mean, but this one is technically, it differs from state to state. For this Colorado, of course, some of the judges will say whether you still, want to retain this judge or not. And then beside that, you can see that there is also voting for whether you want to amend the constitution. So all these, put it another way, it also becomes very time consuming for them to do the vote counting, because you are not just counting which presidential candidate get the votes, but you also have to count on all these. That will make it becomes time consuming. So that will have a very serious implication, especially on the 3rd of November when counting starts. The reason is, right, currently the common view is that on the 3rd of November, when vote starts to count, it is very likely that Donald Trump will show, a temporary lead, which before the postal votes start to come in, right? So on the 3rd of November, the likelihood is that, right, in terms of popular vote, Donald Trump will get 57% of it, because more are the in-person voting. Although we are not very sure of those early voting, how many actually goes to Donald Trump. But if you base on historical data, it's likely that Donald Trump will get about 57%, which actually depend on the states. It really translates to about 408 electoral votes, right? So if that being the case, actually Donald Trump may, and very likely he will declare victory, right? Although the final result is not out yet. But what happened is that once all the votes counting are completed, and when we put this on the 9, actually it's assuming that, remember, Wisconsin can still count the votes until 9th of November, but this one has been changed, so actually it's until around 6th of November. But having said that, the final outcome may be Joe Biden getting 54% of the popular votes and 334 electoral votes, which actually turn to the other way around, that Biden is the ultimate winner. Now the question is just like my first slide saying that, will this bring the U.S. into a constitutional crisis where Donald Trump does not want to admit the defeat because he has been talking about postal vote is a fraud and all this. So if that being the case, right, there are a few alternatives that Donald Trump can do. One is that, of course, bring it to legal case and then get all the recount. Of course, during the process, right, it creates a lot of uncertainties. And let's say even assume that the final count is still showing that Biden is the winner, will Donald Trump accept it? Because if you look at the US Constitution Article 2, which is relatively vague in a sense that actually the incumbent president can have the executive power to order every state choose a representative, choose one electoral college, right? The representative to vote for the president. That means every state is only one vote. If that being the case, it's definitely Donald Trump will become the president, because at this moment, US, most of the states, right, are under Republican. Of course, this will bring to the Democrat that may disagree with that, go into the court case again. So it will create a lot of uncertainty, at least for 2 to 3 months. Right? That is a nightmare that the market want to see. But having said that, we can't rule out this possibility that actually this may happen. Actually, this may happen. Okay. So, but what is the market perception now? Let's look into it. And actually, it's very split. If you look at the bond market, right? If you look at the yield spread, which is between the 30 years and the 5 years bond spread, you can see that actually it moved in tandem when you shifted it about 5 to 6, actually 6 weeks, 6 weeks compared to the Biden's approval. It technically moved in tandem, right? You can see the Biden approval is the blue line, the yield spread is the red line. But if you look towards into that, actually you can see that the yield spread is increasing, right? I mean, they are factoring in that when Joe Biden is elected, right? He probably will raise tax. The risk for the long-term bond getting tells you that the equity market is very undecisive, right? If you look at this part, you can see that it has been up and down, either because the blue line is assuming, not assuming, is technically based on historical, this is what the market will behave when the incumbent lost the election. right? The red line is when it get re-elected. So it has been a little bit uncertain. Initial stage, it taking that as if that Donald Trump will lose. Now it also goes back to maybe that Donald Trump will win. So the whole situation is the bond market and the equity market actually are having a very different view. So who is right? Is still anybody guess. Although normally in the past, if you talk on economy, bond market normally is more reflective. But in terms of election, we are not very sure, frankly speaking, right? So, I mean, what are the differences between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in terms of policies and all this? Frankly speaking, most of the, I mean, that is the reason why equity market is a little more cautious. Uh, 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 in term because Biden said that he will raise the tax, right? Raising tax technically means that actually first corporate tax means that your earnings, right, will get affected. That means the market valuation will have to become coming down rather than entitle a high and you definitely market that he is in favor of uh, uh, capital gains tax, right? Which is what the last thing that the equity market want to see. So, who will win the election? Nobody knows, but Biden win the election at the very early stage. You probably will see market having some correction, but subsequently, I think it will adjust itself back, which I will share with you later. Right? So now, of course, straight ticket. That means if they vote for Biden, they will also vote for Democratic senators, right? Republican Senate. Trump with a Democrat is unlikely to happen, right? It's unlikely. Probably will be more favor towards other than US and Asian market to and Republic is definitely US market because Wall Street love Donald Trump. So funds will retain or remain in the US market. Now, so having said that, let's say irrelevant of who win the who win the election, I mean, what happened to the world economy? Because we still have to live with the coronavirus, right? So how it will affect and what is the situation now? Of course, we know that, even toys also have the so-called home place. Now, the situation is that at this moment, most of the government are still technically struggling to balance between and to have a lockdown or a very tough measures, and that's more, I say more wave. Yeah. Okay, I mean, it's not compared to the first wave, but it's you compare to China, which have a very tough lockdown, and now actually economic activities is much better because it contained the virus at the very beginning. But having said that, it doesn't mean China won't have a third wave, fourth wave, and so on. But at this moment, because the very stringent initial lockdown on the first wave, that economic activities is better than the rest of the world, right? So now the question now is, as right, scientists start to discover more about this virus, actually it also tells us that without vaccine, we can't expect the economic activities to really go back to the pre-coronavirus level. Reason is one. I mean, so as economic, the research study has shown that actually this coronavirus can stay on your skin and remain active for close to 9 hours, which is actually 5 times of the normal influenza virus, which means that let's say you happen to have a close contact, right? And normally you just sanitize your hand, right? I mean, if your arm and all these are still there are virus, when you go back home, assuming that if you don't take a shower immediately or you go back to office, right, it can spread to others. It can still spread to others. That's why currently the virus, as economic activities resume, right, despite, we talk about sanitizing the hands and all this, it is still not able to fully contain. And on top of that, another study also shows that actually, even let's say if you are infected, right, whether even assuming a symptomatic patient infected and recover, and there's antibodies in your body, but it can only last about 3 months, which if you compare from the first wave, 3 months has technically almost over. And that's the reason why you see that a lot of countries are start to seeing that, this coronavirus is coming back again. And on top of it, another study also shows that, as temperature becomes lower and lower, then the percentage of infection actually increase, right, by more than 5%, because when it coming down, it's minus 5%. So when it go up, because of asymmetric, it's slightly higher than 5% for every 1 degree drop in temperature. And you can see this very clearly, right? This is a New York City, right? You can see that the green line, the temperature is inverted. So when the green line move up, that means the weather is getting colder and colder. And you can see that, right, based on the K indicator, which telling you that the second wave in New York, right, start to pick up again. So this is very clear that as Northern Hemisphere start going into autumn and winters, there's no way to eliminate the virus. The only possibility is how to contain it, right? How much lockdown the world need to do, right, to avoid a serious outbreak like we see in the first time in March, right? And this one all depends. There are 2 factors. One is that you impose a very serious lockdown. Another one is following the Taiwan model, very transparent, telling people where are the places now they have infection, so that people will automatically try to avoid that. Then ultimately you can contain it. So we have to see each country how they implement their policy to contain this coronavirus, right? So what is the current situation? How bad is it? Based on our K indicator, which we derive from the SIR model, which is susceptible, infected, and recover. In fact, this may have to change later, because recover doesn't mean you're totally perpetually immune. But anyway, if we just based on this model, first you look at US, you can see that the red line is gradually moving up. It's not that serious, but you can see that this is, right, a third wave already. It's a third wave already, right? Then Europe is very clear, right? You see the red line. France and Germany is definitely in the second wave, right? It's very clear. China, right? Despite what we say, you can see that there is an uptick here already, right? Of course, this K indicator doesn't mean it's 100% accurate. It can give you some false signal, but you have to be careful also. Even China may face, right, for China, actually, it's the fourth wave already, right? I mean, you can see 1, 2, 3. Then this is the fourth wave, right? Start to see uptick. So even for China, if they are not careful, they may go into the fourth wave, and that may also slow down the economy, right? Japan also some gradual moving up, right? Not that serious yet, right? Korea is getting a bit more serious. Malaysia, one good news is that we start to see that the K indicator start to come down. So if at this moment the CMCO, right, works properly, that means everybody try not to moving around too much, we probably were able to bring or rather to say to end our third wave, right? To end our third wave. So how they can do it, all this country, it all depends on how stringent the government implement the policy, right? You can see even US now, the stringency index has moved up again. And normally, it's very effective, right? You can see that as, when the K indicators start to come down, then essentially the government will be more relaxed, right? So stringency index come down. But when you see there's a sign, right, of second wave coming up, you can see that stringency increase, then it come down. So we will see how all this country contain it. Germany at this moment is one of the exceptional where they still didn't really getting more stringent. Right, you can see China is very clear on the second wave. They are very fast. Immediately, right, from here, they raise it up again. So we have to see how the country movement will be, right? Korea also very clear. Japan also very clear, right? For Malaysia also, essentially, right, once we see that the K indicators start to move up, although Malaysia government is a little bit slow, but it becomes more stringent, right? That's why we have the CMCO and all this. So now, the whole question is that I think sometimes, as and when you look at what our Ministry of Health DG, when he commented, he always also used one word called the R0, right? The reproduction rate, because you need to bring it down to 1, at least so that you can contain it. And unfortunately, at this moment, most of the countries are above 1, right? And Malaysia is one of the few, essentially, it's the highest among the ASEAN country. We are at 1.2. Right? DG say if we bring down to 0.3, then everything is okay. But frankly speaking, to bring down to 0.3 is not an easy job, right? If we can bring down to 1, I think we should be very happy. Let's keep an eye, because if that, then economy activities were able to resume better. So because of all this, then that's very clear, right? The mobility, right? After the end of the May, right? Everybody get happy, right? Among the G7 countries, right? Economic activities start to resume, people start to move around. That's why the mobility goes up. Then after that, right? Because start to see signs that, the number of infectants start to increase. That's why people become more cautious. As people become more cautious, you know that this will slow down the economic activity. You look at the air traveling, same thing, right? The number of frequencies of the flights, right, has not really recovered back, right? It's still much below the pre-corona, except for China, right? China, because it has the very first wave, right, it imposed a very, very tough lockdown. That's why it's able to contain. But even now, you can see that it starts to come off a little bit, because, like I say, K indicator indicates that, you also have to watch out on China, whether, right, the third wave will become more serious or not, right? And that also affect the world trade, right? When economic activities, when things start to back to normal, you can see that the index, right, shot up. Now we come back to the slightly below the last year level. Okay. So another thing, right after the election, what will happen to the US-China trade war? Frankly speaking, some of you may have seen this. Actually, irrelevant of who is the president, I think the US-China, especially on the technology side, the dispute, or you want to say the tension, will continue because this so-called revising US grand strategy towards China by Council on Foreign Relations, right? This report was written in March 2015, right? So technically, it has made it very clear that ultimately what they say is that consciously exclude China, right? Recreating a technology control regime involving US allies that prevents China from acquiring military and strategic capabilities. This is the summary inside the report, right? So the only difference is when Donald Trump, he is talking only America only, right? If Biden, probably it will be even tougher for China because Biden will try to engage, right, the US allies, right, like Europe and Japan together to counter the China technology development. So this will continue and it will get tougher. And again, like I say, we don't know who will be the president yet. And we also don't know, right, whether this Mao Chun-yi or his Christian name is called Mao Yi. Currently, he is an advisor to Mike Pompeo. And a lot of the US policies on China actually are inside these two books. So for those who are interested, right, you can try to get this book from Amazon and then read it, because if Donald Trump win the election, Mike Pompeo is still the state secretary. Very likely, Mao Chun-yi will still be his advisor, and the policy and strategies towards China probably will just follow these two books, most of it. So keep an eye on that. Now, in terms of trade war, on Huawei is technically a little bit of political show at this moment. But once the election is over, we are not very sure, right? Why I say it's political show is because of the Huawei handphone, let's say Mate 30, US component is only 1% only, right? The rest are from Korea and Japan. So this one actually don't really hurt China, neither it hurt US, because Donald Trump may act on it, which was 3 months ago, just for his political campaign on the re-election. But after that, we never know, because you notice that they just ended the China committee meeting, right? Also, it's made it very clear that by 2035, China will definitely want to be a powerful country in terms of national strength, right? Of course, it didn't really mention the world-class military, but with Xi Jinping still as the leader, I don't think this will change. That's where I think, irrelevant of who is the president, in fact, I would say that if Biden is the president, it becomes tougher, because Donald Trump, to a certain extent, is still very businessman-oriented thinking, right? So if Xi Jinping, right, call him up, assuming he won the election, give him a congratulatory call, and then say, let's sit down, we discuss on the trade issues again. I'm going to, compromise and all this. I think things actually can move much faster and easier, less tougher, which may be benefit to the whole world economy. Right, so this one, I think I will skip it. So what happened to US now? I mean, let's look back, right? Because market has gone up so much. For market to continue to sustain, we need the economic fundamentals to follow. Of course, we know that the ended, right, third quarter GDP is very good, after all, because it dropped significantly on the second quarter. But Donald Trump is so happy because he said it's the highest GDP growth, 33.1%. But if you look into it, US economy has not fully recovered. And if there is let's say if Donald Trump wins the election and he's still not taking the coronavirus seriously, US may go into the situation like what you see in around April, right? Where a lot of lockdown by state may happen, right? Because if they can't contain it properly, because even now you can see that consumer spending actually has not really go back to the full pre-coronavirus level. Although the number seems good, right? But if you adjusted for the subsidies, it's not as good as what you think it will be. Then, if you look at the local business open, the number of hours the employee is working and all this, you can see that it is still below the pre-coronavirus level. And this, if coronavirus getting worse, this will drop even further. So this is one thing, US economy has not recovered to where it was before, despite whatever you can say or Donald Trump can say about it, right? Air traveling also is the same thing. That's why airlines are still in big trouble, right? Even hotels in US, right, it still has not come back to the pre-coronavirus level. Restaurant booking also is still below pre-coronavirus, right? Right, it's still 40% below. If you look at the restaurant booking, you look at the hotel, it's also in terms of the occupancy rate, right? It's still 50% below the coronavirus level. So you can see that economy actually is not as strong as what the data show you, right? So which means that some of the corporate earnings are not that strong. So which means that market, right, need a stronger economy to justify the current level. To justify, that's why, of course, election is also another factor that market move a little bit sideways. But if you look into it, it's very clear, right? If you look into this chart, it's very clear. Coronavirus, it dropped sharply, right? Then after that, the pink shaded area is where after the central bank, it's not only US Federal Reserve, but around the world, actually for most of the market around the world, it showed a similar trend. The central bank, right, start to so-called bring down the interest rate almost to the historical low. And for US, technically it's historical low. Then injecting liquidity, then the market rebounded, right? Because the worry of the financial system collapse is over. Then after that, it's hovering sideways for a while because people are uncertain when the economy activities can resume. Bear in mind, this is during around April time. So once economy activities start to resume, that means the lockdown start being relaxed, right? So market cheers, it goes up, and it continue to goes up because market, beside liquidity, market believe that it's probably is a V-shaped recovery. So earnings should come back fast. But after, come to down around end of August, they realize that things are not as what is the expectation will be, because the economy, right, if you look at all those high frequency data, it tells you that no matter how you look at it, at best it's still only 80% of the pre-coronavirus level. And market, right, already factor in the next year earnings, right? So it becomes more challenging for market to go further higher, right? Except being supported by the liquidity, right? So same, the only difference is Nasdaq. Even Nasdaq now come down a little bit because Nasdaq is because the so-called new lifestyle, right? Work from home and all this relies a lot on technology. That's why it goes against the trend. But when it comes to here, right, beside the election uncertainty, also start to worry how far the earnings, the market can support the earnings growth or not, or rather to say earnings growth can support the market or not, right? So this one we can skip the European one. Now, another question is Nasdaq in a bubble already? But if you look at the ratio between Nasdaq and S&P, right, the high peak here is during the dot-com bubble, right? The ratio go to 3.5 times. Now, yes, it's about 3.3 times, but because the base is much higher, you compare right? The pre-dot-com bubble, right? It moved from 1.5 times Nasdaq to S&P ratio from 1.5 times to 3.5 times. Here we started off with from 2.5 times, right, to 3.3. So it's not excessive yet. Definitely, right? It is a mini bubble, but it's not a big bubble like what you see during the dot-com bubble time. So it tells you that if the earnings can follow through, there's still some upside on the Nasdaq market, right? Now, go back. Putting all this aside, actually, if let's say after 3rd of November, it is a clear result that either Donald Trump wins convincingly or Biden win convincingly. That means without postal vote, Biden already take most of the states, right? The electoral votes. Then actually market will continue to go up, right? Irrelevant whether it's Republican, the president. In fact, Democrat being the president is more positive to the market over a longer run because they are always advocating the expansionary fiscal policy, right, on the infrastructure spending and all this. So what about Malaysia, right? Malaysia, we all know, first is vaccine. I mean, we know that next week we have the budget. We have to see how much Malaysia government is factoring in on the vaccine cost because we are not very sure whether it's going to be free for all Malaysians or is it you have to pay. Assuming it's free for all Malaysians, it will increase the deficit by another 0.3%. Okay, and we all know, I mean, 2020 GDP is a write-off. So it's all a matter of whether 2021 we can really maintain the growth or not, right? If you look at the market, that's exactly, market has a bit down on the growth because putting the gloves company aside, right, we don't see earnings growth. And in fact, right, on retails and all these things are still very bad, right? You still have not only small shops closing down, right? Of course, I wouldn't be surprised Robinson closed down, but it's also indicator that things are bad, right? And you look at Malaysian market, same thing, right? I mean, like say, if you compare to the S&P, it's the same thing. When central banks start to inject liquidity, markets spike up, then, right, the orange shaded area where it's still in the lockdown, people not sure when you can recover. That's why market moving a bit sideways. Then after that, when start to reopen the economy, then all hopes on the corporate earnings is spike up. Then after a while, people realize that things does not back to what it was before the coronavirus. So you have the weaknesses, and of course, on top of that, we have our political uncertainty and all this. That's why the market becomes weaker, right? I mean, frankly speaking, if you really seriously look at the valuation, our fair value, right, even you take in 2021 valuation, right, it will still be hovering around, you know, at the lower side is 1,368, at the high side is 1,553, right? Today is 1,466, right? So, I mean, the fact is, without foreigners coming in, it is very challenging for Malaysia market to move, right, further high up. That is a fact. And will foreigners come in? Not so soon, because unfortunately, it's not that our economy is like that, but it's just unfortunate that for the listed company, especially whether, you know, foreigners either follow the MSCI index or they look at the KLCI, we don't have the new economy. We don't have so much on the new economy, right? Our indices, right, whether it's MSCI or KLCI, right, majority of the weighting is on financials, right? Technology close to zero, right? Healthcare, right, is only because of the glove companies, right? The new one, right, especially on technology, we don't really have. That's why it's not attractive to foreigners now, because we know that now technology is the one that driving, right, most of the world's market. So that is the problem with our market. But I think over a short-term period, over the next 3-5 years, it's very difficult because it is not our economy, but it's just the stock listed does not really reflect the new economy part. So it's not charming enough. Now, what about commodities? right? Oil supply is supposed to be balanced, but with the new COVID coming in, this may get derailed again, right? Because you know very clear that actually this I will skip this one. This actually, let me see. Okay, maybe I didn't have the slide inside here. Yeah, I didn't put the slide on the mobility, but let me just put it this way. If you look at the oil market, actually it's a function with the mobility. When mobility start to come down, oil price start to get weakened. So now I think the oil price is at a range of between 35 to around 42 because of the COVID, right? Mobility start to reduce, then the demand, despite you enter in the winter, but it's not going to be that strong. Okay. Now, in terms of palm oil, by right, we should be able to benefit from the uncertainty of the soybean because Brazil is having trouble in planting the seed. So by right, it should be doing better, but because of the green technology, the green environment that European is advocating, so that's why it has some cap on our CPO price. So I think it probably will still around the range bound, right? At around this level, right? It won't go that high, you know, it will be around just probably up to around 3,001. And the reason is that because locals is no more issue, so we can't expect a big spike, right? At the 3 months ago, we see some spike here up because of the worry that the locusts may affect a lot of crops, and then affect India and China, and therefore they need more edible oil from our palm oil. But unfortunately, it's over, so we can't expect this to have a factor. And then in terms of gold, I think at this moment, the so-called risk-off situation is at this moment is not that strong. And gold is entering into its seasonal situation where you can see, right, there will be a weakness, right, towards until just before Christmas. Then after that, it will start to move up and then continue until around Valentine's Day. So the super strong because during this period where the COVID-19 created a risk-off mood and everybody switched to gold, at this moment is unlikely to repeat. It will just follow the seasonal trend. Okay, so this one I can skip this part. This one also I can skip. Now, so what are the risk factors? Right, of course, we know that the outcome is a risk factor, right? Because it depends on whether the outcome is a marginal victory for either candidates, then it will create uncertainty for another 2-3 months. But if it's a very landslide victory on either side, I think it's okay. Then if that is okay, the market will start to focus on Brexit, COVID, and also Turkey issue. Some of you are aware that Turkey lira now is technically at historical low, right? So I mean, this will have a spillover onto the emerging market. So that's why you can see that because of the uncertainty on the US presidential election, if you look at the VIX index, it still remains quite high because despite market continue to go up, it never fall below to the normal level of 15 because people are very concerned, right, on the election outcome. And if you look into it, if you look at the VIX future, you look at the blue line, right, as of sorry, you look at the red line, the red line as of last night, technically it tells you that market expect the volatility, which is technically because of the election outcome, to stay up to around January to February, right? It doesn't come down so much. It only start to come down after March. So market, that's why I say equity market still expect, right, a lot of uncertainty on the election outcome. So what it means? It means ultimately, currently, the market will react a lot on the risk factor, right? First is the election outcome. At this moment, if you ask me, my personal view is that Joe Biden is likely to win the election, but I can't expect him to win, right, with a landslide big majority on 3rd of November. Therefore, it will create a lot of uncertainties, at least for the next 1-2 months. So actually, this gives some good opportunities for those who trade on the futures. I mean, what type of strategy you want to trade? I will leave it for our futures team to discuss with you what strategy to trade. But technically, I think there's volatility. When there's a volatility, it's always an opportunity on the future trading. Okay, so with this, I will end my presentation. Thank you very much, and back to you, James.
All right, thank you, Mr. Phua. Right. Okay. Yeah, it is not right now. Okay, I will just let me have a look on the question bar there. Okay. Yeah. So far, just one question related to the presentation just now. One question from Mike asks about what is your forecast for the ACE market in Malaysia? For the ACE market.
This is a very tough question because I don't know what he means by the forecast on the ACE market. Is he referring to the potential of the ACE market, or is it referring to individual stock on the ACE market? Let me put it this way. ACE market, right? I mean, there are some companies in the ACE market seems to be quite okay, but then it's still lack of liquidity. And secondly, even though, like say, I use the word, it seems to be okay, but some of them can still subject to some big competition if there is a change in the technology, or is a slight change, or they face some new competition. So it has the potential for growth, but on the other hand, you have to monitor the companies that you invest in, because any slight change in terms of their competitiveness can also cause a drop in the share price as well. But I would say that there is a potential because, like I say, they are more attractive, right? And more closer to the new economy than our Bursa main board.
Okay, thanks for the answer, Mr. Phua. Okay, due to the time constraints, I will choose another questions. Okay, the last questions for today, related to this topic. Okay, one questions from Michael. Which candidates actually serve Malaysia better? Which candidates?
Okay, I mean, frankly speaking, I don't think they bother about Malaysia lah. So I mean, to say that which candidate serve Malaysia better, you have to see from the perspective of what is their policy towards China, right? I mean, essentially, that is the key part. Like say, if Biden is the president, he may, I mean, very likely it's very clear that he's going to take a very tough position on China. So of course, having said that, so it means that some of the MNC may start to shift out of China, bring their supply chain to elsewhere. But I think our government is going to have a headache, because if the US get very tough on China, so you have to choose which side you stand. That means you have to be either US-centric or China-centric. And you need to make a very, very tough call on that. I mean, China definitely is very attractive in terms of populations, but don't forget, China is talking about the dual circulation, internal circulation and external circulation. When they say external circulation, essentially they are exporting the excess capacity to the rest of the world. So, do you stand a chance to export your products to them? It's very questionable. It's very questionable. So that is the part that, I mean, what I'm saying is that if Biden is the president, he will be tougher on China, then, which means that not only Malaysia, a lot of the countries in the world have to decide which side are they going to take, US-centric or China-centric. A wrong call. I mean, I'm not saying that US-centric is definitely the winning solution or the winning formula. And also, if you choose China, doesn't mean definitely it's a winning solution as well. A wrong call will have a very negative impact on that particular country. So it's not that how they look at Malaysia, it's a matter of how the policy towards China, right? And for Donald Trump, like I say, he is still a businessman, so he may be willing to compromise. If that being the case, then the worry on the trade dispute and all this may ease off, right? May ease off, especially put it this way, there's no more chance for him to be re-elected again. Huh? I mean, only 2 terms, right? So I don't think he need to act so tough, right, towards China, unless it's like advisor like Mao Yi, and Mike Pompeo able to convince him. If not, I think he's a businessman. He may not be that tough. So Donald Trump may give more breathing room for smaller countries like Malaysia, that we don't have to choose side. We still can do business with China. We still can export to US and all this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phua. Yeah, this answer actually also answers some of the questions like during this uncertainty, which company will be benefit. I believe just now Mr. Phua also mentioned some of this. Okay, so due to the time constraint, then we will end our today's webinar. So thank you very much, Mr. Phua, for all these sharings. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So anything you can from audience, you can just email to the branches and also your relative parties. Okay, thank you and have a nice day.